is cope with triggers. I'm Dr. Rayford. It's been a while since I've been here. I've been out for the last 3 weeks. I know that you are in excellent hands, and I do hope that you're continuing to learn a lot in this really, really important program. Um, I've actually, um, I was trying to see what week we were. So we're almost in April. So um, I think we are, goodness, 10 plus weeks in. And so it's really exciting at this point. So the topic today is cope with triggers. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about triggers. Really important kind of food for thought right now is that all triggers, so triggers are neutral. There are triggers that encourage us to do more healthful habits, and then there's triggers for us to do less helpful habits. And so having a trigger doesn't mean that it's bad in and of itself. And so think about the neutral triggers. Think about triggers as neutral and think about how the triggers can influence your activities, and then classify the activities as ones that are more healthful and helpful and those that are less helpful and healthful. Um, so just to check in, how's everybody been doing over the last 3 weeks? Any success stories, challenges that you've overcome, questions that have come up in the class since I've been out?
It's
Um,
going well. My activity was decreased this past week with just the weather and crazy schedule, but I did lose a pound last week.
okay, awesome. And just probably a late reminder, I'm sure, is now in the form of a habit. People weighing in and submitting their weights and recording their activities. I hope that you're all doing those things, and that you are noticing some differences because of the program. So, what I'll do is just jump right into the lesson. And so, if you're, if you go to the site and you access the lesson, there's a story of a participant vignette, and this participant's name is Marta. And just like most of the other people in the vignettes, she's at risk for type 2 diabetes, and she knows that she needs to change her eating and fitness habits. So, what Marta does is she starts thinking about her activities during a typical day. So, like many of us, Marta gets up early at 5:30 in the morning. As soon as she gets to the kitchen, she starts making coffee. The smell of coffee is something that helps with waking up. Um, as she's drinking the coffee, she warms up pastry to dunk into her coffee. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she starts getting drowsy, and that's like many of us, especially me. So she stops off again at the coffee machine in the staff lounge, where she passes by the vending machine and she buys herself another pastry, which she dunks in her fresh coffee. Later in the evening, as a way to unwind, she curls up on the couch and watches TV. And then during commercial break, she gets up and grabs a bag of chips and a beer. And so, as you're thinking about Marta, what are some of the triggers for what are some of the triggers that you've identified in Marta's story? And then not only naming the trigger, but what are some of the behaviors that the triggers are leading to?
Well, like the morning coffee, she is having a pastry with it, just cause out of habit more than anything. It sounds like.
Okay. So one trigger is waking up. And so drinking coffee triggers the need to get pastry, and she does something interesting with the pastry. She dips it into her coffee. So during the day, you can see where when she gets sleepy again, as she reaches for the coffee, she's also presented with another opportunity to get the pastry. And so, you know, the you know, the triggers are one way to think about it. One trigger is her being sleepy and kind of her desire for alertness. So that trigger of wanting to wake up. And then the other trigger is the coffee. So actual drinking of the coffee. What about during the evening? What other trigger have what other trigger um did Marta I mean, what other trigger could you find in Marta's evening routine?
Just boredom or mindless eating while she was watching the TV.
Okay. So during a commercial break, getting the bag of chips and a beer. Not mentioning, another trigger is this unwind. So after a stressful day, so stressful days. And what did Marta do after the stressful days is she would curl up on the couch and start watching TV. And potentially another trigger would be the TV triggering the bag of chips and the beer, or the stressful day triggering the beer. So as you go on through Marta's story, she looks at her triggers and she decides that what she wants to do is to cope with those triggers. Sure, she knows that eating better and moving more are important parts, but Marta realizes that reacting to her triggers in a different way is really important too. And for some people, it may be the thing that starts them out to be successful. So, what Marta does is she realizes that being sleepy is a trigger, and she realized that she needed more sleep. So, what she decided to do was to get more sleep at night by changing her routine, which she found caused her to be less drowsy throughout the day. She still drinks her morning and afternoon coffee, but instead of the coffee itself triggering the pastry, she has plain non-fat yogurt with berries. And so what this time she did was she replaced the behaviors. She replaced the behavior to the same trigger. So she made strategies to eliminate the trigger of sleepiness. She kept the trigger of coffee and instead changed the behavior. And so associated now the plain yogurt and the berries instead of the pastries. Another trigger for Marta identified was that just passing by the vending machine at work was a trigger to buy the pastries. So instead, what she does is she's bringing her snacks to work. She brought baby carrots so that she has a snack already, so that by the time she passes the vending machine, she already has her snack. And then the last thing was thinking about her activity and the triggers around her activity. So Marta still watches TV to help unwind after a stressful day. But what she did this time is while watching TV, she rides a stationary bike or lift weights while she's watching it. And now instead of the evening snack of chips and beer, she has cut up vegetables. And so what you can see with Marta, if you think about what she did, she re-engineered the things that she evaluated her triggers. She identified those things that were still important to her. So the drinking coffee and the unwinding from TV. And so you may find that you may actually find that there are some things that are important to you or bring a lot of relief, and you don't have to get rid of those things. So, you don't have to, as Marta did, you didn't have to stop watching TV, But what you could do was change your activity while watching TV, and then having access to a healthy snack helped her not snack on the chips and the beer. So in this lesson, it's about one, identifying the triggers that you have, and we're all different. We have different triggers. For some people, the trigger could be, if you can just imagine driving down the street in the city that has a Krispy Kreme, if that red sign is on, there are people who will be triggered to make whatever turn they can into the driveway to get fresh Krispy Kreme donuts. You think of other triggers, being angry, triggers like um, triggers like other people bringing dessert food to the lunch potluck, and things like that. And so, again, to go back to the triggers in and of themselves are neutral, and our behaviors can be helpful for us, or less helpful for us. And so we have the slides now. Rebecca, is there anything else on this slide? What are the triggers?
It just brings them in.
Okay.
Certain examples. I know from just some tobacco cessation classes I've taught, many of the triggers are the various senses, like the smell of the coffee, the touch of the cigarette that they would hold in their hand, or sometimes the texture of certain foods that you're craving. And I would call it peanut butter and jelly. They go together so well, like you were mentioning the donut and the coffee. And one of the strategies we try to help our patients who are trying to stop tobacco do is separate your peanut butter and jelly. You can still have the coffee, you can still have the other thing, but not together, so that you kind of start breaking those habits of where you're automatically doing something because you're doing something else, like eating in front of the TV. So I will go through and just let it list some of these triggers.
Okay.
Let's see if it'll.
Yeah,
it's not going to go forward for me.
So while she's listening, kind of clicking through the slide, does anybody know of any triggers in their life and are willing to share triggers that they've identified? The trigger can either have you eating in a way that you're not wanting to eat, eating in a way that's beneficial, moving in a way that's beneficial, or moving in a way that's not. So you can be the triggers can make us sit down or can make us move. So any triggers that the participants are willing to share?
Was the question about what are some of our trigger foods?
No, not foods. So foods can be triggers, but what about other triggers? So yes, foods can definitely be triggers. Emotions can be triggers. Situations, smells, places can be triggers. People can be triggers. So has anybody noticed a trigger in their life?
I know one of mine is when I get tired, and it's especially junk food, especially if I'm driving. Like my sister lives in Nashville, so I go to see her all the time, and I just automatically get me a candy bar or something for when I hit that midpoint and I'm just kind of tired of driving, tired of looking at the road. That's my perk me up, so I probably need to pick something other than a candy bar.
Okay. What about other triggers? So there's one comment in the chat box that says that their kids' baseball games triggering the habit of eating nachos and soda, which seem to be necessary for watching baseball. Okay. Anybody have any activity triggers? Things that make you more likely to not be active and not. I'll share one of my own. So it used to be a bigger trigger than it is because I have options now. But previously, if I came home from work, then it was unlikely for me to leave the house again to go back and exercise. So coming home first would be a trigger for me not to exercise. Um, and so what I did was I made sure that I had the equipment and clothing to exercise before I got home, as well as um, being able to go to gyms on different sides of town. So I have 2 gym memberships so that depending on what side of town that I'm on, I can go to the gym if I need be. And then ultimately, the more recent solution to the trigger of not exercising at home is I have some exercise equipment that I researched and bought, and I use them when I'm doing things like on Zoom calls or conference calls and things like that, or when I'm watching TV in the fun room. So now I have exercise equipment in the same place as something that, maybe watching a movie while I'm on the exercise bike or the elliptical. So now the trigger of just coming home after work doesn't stop me from exercising, that I have an option to exercise at home.
One thing we have in the chat is that their kids' baseball games and,
Yeah.
and the concession stand trigger more bad eating habits with nachos and soda because you don't have so many necessarily from a
No.
concession stand, and you're kind of trapped there for that period of time.
Yep. Another comment in the message board is that studying is a trigger, and the kind of the, what am I trying to say? The feeling like you want to stack every time you study. And I remember in my days when I was younger, studying was a significant trigger, especially when coupled with sleep deprivation. So my study habits involved a lot of all night study sessions and late night study sessions. And so my trigger was not just studying, but actual sleep deprivation. And I remember my standard my standard drink of choice when I was studying a whole lot more in college and early professional school was Mountain Dew, and drinking lots and lots of Mountain Dew to both study and stave off sleep deprivation. So another comment in the chat box is working in the office late at night is a trigger for hot dog and Ruffles queso potato chips from the food court. I've never heard of the Ruffles queso potato chips. I'm really interested in them. That's my comment. Any other triggers that you're willing to share or you've identified?
I sometimes will say, I deserve it. We got through this accreditation site visit. We did this. I deserve chocolate or whatever it is as just a reward.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay. So some of the other triggers. So if you go to the handout, it lists some triggers, and what they're doing is they've separated some of the important tasks for preventing diabetes and being healthy. 3 big categories: shopping triggers. So, thinking about, you've heard the advice, don't go shopping when you're hungry. So being hungry is a trigger for buying more high calorie, high processed um, foods. Being anxious, sad, stressed, or mad. Again, probably some of the same impulses in buying foods that are very calorie dense. Another trigger that many people are susceptible to is it's just very it's very hard to turn down a bargain. And so snack foods are almost always prominently displayed and often on sale. So if you look at the amount of food that you can get just in terms of snacking, it seems like snacks get cheaper and cheaper, while whole foods, fresh foods, all those get more expensive. And so um, the it's a bargain can be a trigger for people to buy unhealthy food. You know, if you're able to get a family size bag of Doritos for what you would have previously paid for a much smaller bag, it feels like a deal. Um, the appearance, so the temptations. Um, there's a reason that Sam's Clubs give you sample of food. People are more likely to buy it when they're sampling the food. So not only are you looking at it, you're actually getting a chance to taste it. So you're very, very likely to buy it if you're sampling it. The other category of triggers, the lesson breaks down into eating triggers. These are the triggers that influence what you eat, when you eat, how much you eat. Again, hunger. So if those, if if you can remember, the different phases of hunger, there's the, you know, I'm ready for the next meal. Then there's the, I'm not thinking clear. And then there's the, I'm very angry and I can't think clear forms of hunger and then what you're more likely to reach for when you're in those different phases of hunger. Emotions are um, other types of triggers that can trigger, who says, when I'm sad and blue, I eat carrots? Not common. Chocolate, rich food, um, things like snack foods. So, thinking about those triggers, boredom is a trigger. Driving to Nashville, can trigger you to eat when you're bored. And then, I think one of the pandemic related triggers, since, in response to the isolation and all of the other kind of psychological impacts of this crazy pandemic is I'm going to bake stuff. So I'm going to learn how to bake this and bake that and bake that. One week, my wife made like 6 batches of sugar cookies, and and she would make it, and she would keep making it because she wasn't satisfied with the outcome. But she just had tons and tons of sugar cookies because she was trying to perfect the recipe. And I that's part of the COVID boredom. And then lastly, the other triggers are triggers to being still. And those are the triggers that keep us from meeting our physical activity requirements. So, triggers like I've come home from work, now I'm at home. The trigger is, well, I don't want to go and change clothes and go back out. Again, emotions, pain can be a trigger. I'm in pain, so I'm going to be still because I'm in pain. Many people find pain relief through movement. It may not be the movement that they intend, but it may be different kind of movement. So people with joint pains and things like that may find water-based activities or yoga or gentle stretching activities as a way to move, but also to relieve pain. And then there's the triggers of um, I'm doing something else. I'm watching TV. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm in Zoom meetings. I'm not moving because I'm doing those things. I'm in the office doing telehealth. So, so those are the types of triggers. And what I want y'all to do is to think about some of the triggers that you've encountered for, and Think of one that you would like to have a different behavior. And then I want you to think about what it is you want to do. Do you want to add a replacement behavior? Do you want to avoid the trigger altogether? Or do you want to replace the trigger with another trigger? So adding, another trigger is saying, when I feel hungry, I'm going to do fill in the blank. Avoiding it is, I will have meals prepared and ready for me, so that I can eat every 4 hours. You're avoiding the hunger trigger by being scheduled in terms of the meals. And then the other is replacing the trigger. So the vending machine triggers me to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my healthy snacks so that the snack can keep me from needing anything that's in the vending machine. So does anyone have a trigger that they've identified and have an idea of what they would want to do um, to um, to cope with that trigger?
I've read that a common acronym HALT, hunger, anger, loneliness, or tiredness were common triggers. So I know hunger for me, and Angel can hear me snacking on my little nuts that I now pack in my middle drawer to try not to go get chocolate, that just have it handy within arm's reach almost.
Okay. What about anybody else like to share a trigger and a potential solution or potential way to cope with that trigger? So there's a comment in the chat box that movement helps take their mind off of snacking. So um, using movement using movement as a trigger to reduce snacking, and just getting up and moving and taking a stroll can reduce that urge. So what you see on your screen is a box now, but the action plan journal. So again, action plan journal is something that you can use to set short-term goals for the next week. It'll ask you relevant questions to clarify those goals and to set you up for success. If you want to use the formal action plan, you can access that through our site. If more likely people are making goals more, outside of paper, I encourage you to, in some way, write down your goals so that as you look back, you can see yourself accomplishing those goals. And what's great about this program is teaching you about the different components that are needed to successfully improve your health. So the weight loss goal, the exercise goal, the ultimate goal of preventing diabetes, it's more than just advice to eat less and exercise more. And so really thinking about your triggers, many people um, can find a lot of success by identifying and coping with those triggers. Success that may have not been there in previous attempts to make a lifestyle change. So I encourage you to take a look at the lesson, a look at all the other different kinds of triggers that the lesson mentioned and some of the solutions. And on the side, there's always room for your own unique solutions. We all lead different lives, and the solutions we find in our own lives are going to be the ones that's going to help us be successful. So what I'll ask is, if there's any more questions or comments, and if not, then what we'll do is can I allow you to get back the rest of your day. Thank you for letting me present. I'm excited to be back. Looking forward to the rest of the sessions. Reminder to weigh in, submit your weights by email, as well as your physical activity minutes. And let us know if there's something that you'd like to see, if there's some topics that you think would be important along with the sessions that you're having. We have access to some really important content level experts, or an incredible dietitian who's been a great resource for the program, as well as the exercise specialist in the Wellness Center. So next week, let's see, next week, the topic is going to be keep your heart healthy. And if you need the handout, it's on the website, as well as the link to join the meeting. So with that being said, I'll open the floor again for a final set of comments and rounds, and then if not, we'll close it out. All right, so y'all have a great rest of the day. Let us know if we can help you in any way. Good night.